their report this morning a little before 8 o'clock. So you'll want to have that pulled up and or print a copy. And if you are willing, I'll ask you to turn on your camera. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. It looks like people are in critical mass here for the most part. So welcome. As you can see by my background, it looks like I'm completely sitting in a different city than you all probably are. I need to come up with a gray and overcast TCU campus picture, I guess, for days like today to put behind me. But anyway, it's good to see everybody again, and happy to have this time with you this morning. What we're going to do today is going to be a little bit different. We are not doing a case, which I understand is a win for you all. And what I'm going to do is a debrief of your emotional intelligence assessment that you took. Thank you for putting some time into that. So this is going to be a little bit different feeling of a session. I'm going to go through the report so you kind of understand what you're looking at. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to debrief with some peers in a small group and kind of talk about your results. And then after that, really what you do with it is up to you. I hope that since your leaders have invested the opportunity for you to take this assessment, that you are willing to embrace it fully and try to learn a little bit about your leadership style and where you've got some strengths and where you may have some ability to leverage some additional opportunities. But certainly as we go through this, it's a little bit of an information dump, but please stop and ask any questions. I'm happy to pause and give you a little bit deeper dive. And then after this, when you get back to your office and you have time to get into your results a little bit further, if you want to schedule some one-on-one time or you've got some additional questions that are really specific to you that you'd rather not share with the group, I'm happy to host that conversation with you as well. A couple caveats I'll give you about the assessment. This is your report. I am only able to share it with you. I'm not able to share it with anybody else at Elbit. So rest assured that it is confidential to you and will not be shared beyond that. So any questions before we dive in? Everybody good? Okay. All right, so then let's go ahead and get started. I've got a sample report pulled up here, and you, like I said, you have all received your own copy of your report this morning. So yours may look a little bit different than what I've got pulled up here, but let me just get started. So as a reminder, you took a 133 item assessment on various aspects related to emotional intelligence. And the lens that we're going to look through that today is really kind of around this transformational leadership model that you see on the screen here. So while there are different behaviors and competencies related to emotional intelligence, really what I want you to think about this is I'm going to give you numeric scores and I'm going to plot it on a line and it's going to look kind of statistical, but really I want you to think of this as just how am I showing up? What are people around me seeing? The assessment is created so it will weed out any answers that you might have answered from a positive kind of reflection perspective. You wanted to maybe look a certain way, or it'll whittle out any negative impressions as well. And it will also look for answer consistency. So all of that is taken into effect to kind of capture your emotional intelligence score. And the reason I tell you that is, if you're having a bad day or, what have you, you don't have to worry that that's going to skew the report and the results too significantly. The flip side of that is, you know your role and life. So you are the only one who can really put some context around the discussion that we're going to have today. All I can do for you is kind of help you interpret the results and see what's there. I think you'll find most of this is probably not terribly surprising to you, but there probably will be some takeaways where you think, okay, maybe I need to explore that a little bit more. So when I talk about looking at this through, the leadership lens, there's kind of 4 core functions to leadership, obviously showing up as a fair and transparent leader, coaching teams, coaching your direct reports, having a vision, an insight, and then also taking a look at how do we do things better? So what do we do in the spirit of innovation to improve our organization? And that's kind of the lens that we're going to look through this today. So if you want to scroll down to your report, your next page, you're going to see just kind of a really high level summary. And to give you a lay of the land in terms of how we're going to look at these 15 subscales, you can see on the top bar there, you've got your overall emotional intelligence score. So for example, for this particular person, their overall emotional intelligence score is 123. And we kind of look at 90 to 100-ish as being kind of the mean. So where people will really start to see your performance in this area is if you're in about a 10-point band beyond that. So if you're kind of starting to slip into the 80s or maybe the 110s, people around you are going to see that. They're going to see, when you are exhibiting stress. They're going to see when you are, in control of your emotions, when you're being flexible, whatever the particular domain is. And then where you see that gold bar, I've taken your results and compared them to leaders who have taken the same assessment and who are considered highly emotional intelligent. So that gold bar we refer to as the leadership bar. And so that's if you kind of want to track compared to mean and track to folks who are successful leaders, that gold bar is kind of the band that you want to look at. A couple caveats about that gold band. When you pull the assessment data, you can compare it to a number of group of norms. So the norms that I've selected for your comparison are leaders who are in a global environment, so they are not just US and Canada based. And I also did not filter out for age or gender, which is something that you can do. However, again, when comparing yourselves to other leaders, we very often don't have the need or the wherewithal to compare by age and gender. So this is comparing you without age and gender considered into it. Just for your own FYI, if I did compare it based on age and gender, you'd see a few things that are trends, but not necessarily statistically significant. So for example, if I compared you to women only, and you are a male, you would probably see that the females tend to be a little bit higher in emotional intelligence, and that's not necessarily anything innate, but strictly it's more due to socialization. If I compared by age, you would see those folks who are, let's say, more seasoned in their career or a little bit older, will show higher emotional intelligence as well. And some of that is just, they've just had more life experiences thrown at them. So while those aren't statistically sound, those are typical trends that you probably see. So I've got up here, or you can see on your report, and I'll go through the subscale, so don't worry just yet about the meaning behind them. Your top 3 subscales, and then you can see how they compare to the leadership bar. And then you've got the lowest 3 subscales. And I want to make sure it's clear that lowest is relative. So lowest is your lowest, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's low. Your lowest could all still be 90 and above. But that's just kind of the lay of the land there. There's a lot of text on this page. I'm going to let you read that offline. But the other thing that you can see is the bars. So for example, on the where I'm sharing my screen, I've got emotional expression and assertiveness. Those are the same color, and those align in the same domain, which I'll explain in just a little bit. So for example, emotional expression and assertiveness obviously kind of go hand in hand, where if you're feeling a certain way, you feel comfortable and able to express that. So as you look at your results there, you can see, where you've got maybe some linkages. So in terms of your development, certainly there's one approach, as you know, that would say, you know what, I'm going to play to my strengths and look at my top 3 subscales. This is a very developable skill. There's behaviors that you can be coached on to develop. But probably in reality, in terms of your overall emotional intelligence scores, the real development ROI is in those lowest subscales, because those are the ones that would be pulling your top line score down. So any questions about this information? Okay, all right, very good. Move on. All right, this you've seen this. We took a look at last 2 weeks ago, I guess by now it's been. And this is kind of the overall model for emotional intelligence that we're looking at. So for example, when I mentioned the colors, you can see emotional expression and assertiveness align with the domain of self-expression. So the heart of this model is your emotional intelligence score, which breaks down into 5 domains, which break down into 15 subscales. And again, from a developmental perspective, it's the subscales that you would be working on if you chose to take a look at your emotional intelligence a little bit further. But again, I want to remind you that there's real hard data that reflects your emotional intelligence with your overall performance in your work job, your career success, your financial success. And so I want you just to file that away in the back of your mind that, the correlation to leadership and performance certainly stands. All right, the next page is just going to give you very much an at-a-glance look at your emotional intelligence across all the 15 subscales, so you can clearly see kind of where you shake out in terms of your overall scores, and then how you compare to effective leaders on those specific competencies. And then the next page, sorry if I'm going too fast, be sure to stop me. The next phase takes those 4 transformational leadership aspects and correlates the 6 subscales to them. So the way that this happens is through theory and research, the people who put together the assessment, they administer, and then test to see what subscales hang together and whether or not that supports what they see in leadership theory. And so you've got the 6 subscales that relate to these specific aspects of leadership. So for example, you can see this person in the sample here, they're actually pretty high across the model. But if they had a couple that were lower in coaching, those may be very specific ones they want to work on developing in terms of improving their coaching skills with their team. And then at the bottom, you may have want to take a look at if you've got some leadership derailers there. And these are subscales that, again, these, if they're a little bit lower, these are definitely showing up. So this is, people are seeing this. This particular person, this is a sample person, by the way, if I didn't say that. This particular person, they're actually, high, so there's low risk of derailing. But that's certainly something you wanna take a look at from a development perspective as well. Okay. All right, so let's dive into the competencies here. Oops, sorry. Okay. So take a look at your score across the above. This is now just your specific core score for that specific competency. So I'll go through these and we'll talk a little bit about what it looks like to be skilled in that and what it might look like to be unskilled in a particular competency. So obviously self-regard, respecting oneself, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and being okay and accepting of that, recognizing your limitations. That's kind of the skilled end. The unskilled end, might come across as arrogance. It might come across as a little unaware. So self-regard, you've got your score there compared to leadership. Some of the strategies you might think about in terms of self-regard is one that you want to develop. You might want to spend some time collecting feedback. And if I was going to do a 360 assessment on you related to emotional intelligence, I would cut that feedback in terms of peers, direct reports, folks who would be considered your customers or who are on the receiving output of your work. And so, again, just kind of following mentors, getting feedback, and understanding performance. Second competency is self-actualization. That sounds kind of like a very Maslow's hierarchy theory there. But self-actualization is the pursuit of goals and the willingness to take the time to achieve those goals. So it's not the quick win, but slow and steady, and having the emotional wherewithal in order to, kind of stay the course. That's the skilled. Unskilled version might look like somebody who's a know-it-all, might be coming across as a workaholic, might be coming across as pursuing a goal to the extent it's no longer reasonable. So some of the development things around self-actualization might be taking a big project, breaking it into smaller pieces, rethink the project in terms of smaller goals, working with your team on building some of their resilience and their motivation as well. Any questions on that? Pretty self-explanatory. Okay. Emotional self-awareness is just what it sounds like. Understanding your own emotions. We talked in the last session about emotional intelligence being a blend of both personal competence and social competence. And you cannot have either of those if you do not have self-awareness. So obviously unskilled would be somebody who overanalyzes, who relies too much on emotions, who puts too much weight on emotions, who doesn't consider or take in enough data when making decisions. So again, some of the ways to develop this is to kind of balance the intake between facts and emotions, bring challenges and anxieties and struggles with the team out into the light, sit around, hash that out, and then kind of flush through it from there. Okay, next up, oops, sorry. Scroll down. Scroller is not working on my screen. Okay, next up is emotional expression, constructive expression of emotions. Sometimes there is a perception in the workplace that there should not be an expression of emotions. And I would argue that is absolutely incorrect, because that's what makes the human connection and the human touch. But naturally, oversharing or inappropriate sharing or whatever is, the unskilled version of that. So some of the ways to develop your ability to express emotions with your team is to put your own emotions aside, listen to your team, make sure you're not suppressing emotions, make sure you're checking in with your team about how they're feeling, and where it's appropriate also to share your feelings as well. Next is assertiveness. Assertiveness, obviously, communicating your feelings in a way that's not offensive to people, in a way that your beliefs are authentic, and not coming across as stubborn in your beliefs and aggressive and closed. And sometimes in competitive environments, which I think Elbit may have a level of competition and drive in environment, sometimes assertiveness can be on the lower range for folks. So if that's you, don't feel badly about that, because sometimes that's kind of baked into the culture a little bit just by the fact of competition. Independence is the ability to find new ways of work. So one of the things you might do to develop your independence is to do some postmortems after a project. What worked well? What are the even better ifs? People who are independent obviously are self-directed. They are able to act without worrying about the emotional dependency of other people. Unskilled version of that obviously looks like somebody who is not a team player, somebody who is not comfortable with taking direction from folks, somebody who's kind of a lone wolf. So again, balancing across that spectrum. Next up is interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal relationships, that speaks to themselves for the most part, but this is the competency which differentiates a technical expert from a leader. So typically when folks are newly promoted or promoted because of their area of expertise, interpersonal relationships may be an area that they need to spend some time in. Obviously, the unskilled version of that is somebody who is perhaps too concerned with preserving relationships to the point that they cannot be open, they cannot have healthy conflict, they can't say no. And so, again, if that's an area to develop, some of the things to do, obviously, share stories, be open, ask folks how they're feeling, all that good stuff that you all know. All right, empathy. If you have an area or a leader where you are seeing turnover frequently, this is probably an area to look at, because empathy is where employee retention really happens. Empathy is not just recognizing how somebody else feels, but being able to express that recognition. So if I know somebody else is feeling stressful, then I'm not acknowledging or expressing that recognition to them, they don't know that I'm empathetic. So obviously, the downside of empathy are people who struggle with saying no, or maybe that's difficult for them to make a hard choice if it's going to have negative outcomes for people. So again, empathy is where retention happens. Super important in terms of emotional intelligence and leading other folks. Any questions so far on scores? Okay, I'm going to give you a chance to delve into your report a little bit further in just a second. All right, social responsibility is looking beyond yourself, kind of the care and feeding of your team. The downside of that, obviously, is somebody who is so team focused that their own personal goals are being put to the side. There's a balance between both. So not subjecting one to the loss of the other, and really looking at something greater than yourself. So social responsibility is not, saving the whales, or how are you going out and volunteering with your team? I mean, that's obviously a way to connect with them, but really it's looking for something larger and bigger than yourself. Next one is problem solving. And this is not problem solving in terms of can you resolve a problem? This is, are you comfortable with the emotions around problem solving? So are you somebody who leans into it, or are you somebody who gets frustrated and then the emotions become kind of paralyzing to you? And so the ability to not, we talked last time about the amygdala hijack, so the fight, flight, or freeze in the middle of a problem, the ability to manage the emotions and manage through that. Okay, next Reality testing, the ability to see things as they really are, to have a realistic perspective on things. It's difficult to lead if your team does not think that you see things clearly. They can't follow your compass. So having a very clear picture of where things are. If you are somebody who is scored on the lower end of this, you may be coming across as less creative, or a little too black and white, or unable or unwilling to live in the gray area. So one of the things you might have to check yourself on is, am I dealing too much with data and facts? Am I over analyzing? Am I balancing what the facts tell me versus what my gut tells me? So kind of the marriage of those two things is a way to help develop reality testing. Keep running out at the end of the page there. Okay, next up, flexibility speaks to itself. I'm sorry, did I skip impulse control? Excuse me, impulse control. Obviously taking time to weigh pros and cons in trying circumstances. And again, this is not, can you appropriately come up with the right decision in those pros and cons, but can you manage the emotion without it? If you are not as high on the scale on impulse control, you may be coming across as slow moving. You may be perceived as somebody who can't get to launch and is a little slow out of the gate. So if you're somebody who is a little bit lower on impulse control, you want to recognize what are those triggers when you feel the pressure to perform that send you kind of off the rails a little bit, and think about how you can build some delay in responding to that. Flexibility, obviously as a leader, we are all being tasked with flexibility right now, but certainly showing interest in how people are coping with change, helping your team manage through change, helping them manage with the virtual environment, and just recognizing that their emotions around that too. So again, it's really kind of a sensitivity to the other's emotions. Folks who are really high on flexibility have to be careful that you don't come across as scattered, as you don't come across as somebody who's easily swayed and kind of all over the place. So you need to make sure that's kind of grounded. And that's where the reality testing, the combination of some of these interplays together can help. Next up is stress tolerance. Obviously, how well do you perform with increased pressures? We all understand that one. Optimism. Optimism is not just the Pollyanna who's showing up at work every day, but somebody who has a positive trajectory. They understand limitations, they understand challenges, but they have a positive aspect about it as well. Obviously, unskilled people in optimism might come across as somebody who doesn't get the seriousness of a scenario, or again, may be viewed as a little bit out of touch. Believe it or not, optimism is actually a learned behavior. So if this is an area that you're low on, or lower on, it's certainly something that can be coached and developed. And then lastly, you'll see this page in here, which is the well-being indicator. This used to be called the happiness indicator, which I just thought used to be so cheesy. But basically, it's really just that kind of a snapshot of your emotional health in the moment. Everyone has the same 5 points on here in terms of happiness, self-regard, interpersonal relationships, optimism, and self-actualization. And so those are the subscales that kind of come together and form your well-being indicator and your overall emotional intelligence. Okay. All right, so in summary, yeah, I just want to remind you that this is really just kind of a snapshot of your emotional intelligence capacity across the various domains. You've got your results there, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of a test here, and I want to make sure there aren't any questions about your reports before we move on to the next thing. I understand you've just had a very quick overview, and that you'll have a chance to delve into them later. Okay. So what I want to do now, what I'm going to challenge you with, is a little bit of a reflection exercise, because ultimately that's where the learning comes in. It's not me talking to you about your results in your report. It's you thinking about them and giving it that context. So what I'm going to do is, for everyone who has completed a report, we're going to break into just some small groups for about 10 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes-ish. And I want you just to talk about it. Take your report out, take a look at it, kind of flip through page by page. And I want to have you think about and talk about a couple points. What would somebody who knows you well say about these results? Would they say they were on target? Would there be areas where they felt they were a little off? So what would somebody who knows you well say about that? And the reason I'm putting it in that context is sometimes if you think about, well, how would my wife see this? Or how would my son-in-law see this? You know, whatever it is, it's a little bit easier to start to think about and apply the lessons to you. Second thing I want you to talk a little bit is about, where do the results feel like you? Where did you look at a competency in your score and say, oh, okay, yeah, that is kind of how I think I'm showing up. Third question is just that. How is this showing up for you at Elbit? Where do you think people are seeing either your highs or your lows? And then just last, you know, what is there area you want to explore further as you look at your results? My caveat for this part is, it is your data, it is your report, it is your information to share how you want to. So if you only want to talk about your strengths in your small group, that's perfectly fine. And again, I'm sorry to those folks who did not complete a report, but out of sensitivity to those who have, I'll only move in the breakout room if I know that you've completed this. So this is just a little bit of time for you to kind of flip through your pages, talk about it a little bit, reflect on it, and put some context around it. Okay? Questions? All right, I'm going to manually move you here. So give me a little bit of a moment here. Okay, I'm going to open your rooms and I'll message you in about 10 minutes or so.
person.
All right, can you hear me okay? All right, well, typically if this was a one-on-one coaching session, I'd be getting in your business a little bit more about these results and doing a little bit of psychoanalyzing. But I would love to just hear from your breakout rooms, kind of just some of the takeaways in terms of the discussions. Where did this feel like you? You know, what would your selected person say, or kind of just what your overall group was? I tagged the person whose birthday is closest to today, just so there would be no arm wrestling going on in the room. But also put the caveat in there that you really can share anything from your group discussions. So if we could just have one group go ahead and start, and we just had 2 rooms because it's a small group, that'd be great.
Yes. So Ashley and I were together, and just from my perspective, I tried to look at it from my team and then from my wife. And I think that she would look at my highest and lowest, top 3 and bottom 3, and agree with them pretty well. My personal lowest was impulse control, which actually might surprise my team. I think in the work environment, I might cloak that. I'll have to ask a couple of them to see if they agree with that. But in general, Ashley and I were talking about how we can leverage optimism and some of those different areas that it felt generally accurate, and we can see how it plays out at Elbit when it comes to project teams, or we both have a willingness to throw in an idea just to get things moving, even if we were willing to let the team tear apart the idea, but just move it forward. Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you want to jump in and add more as well.
Yeah, we talked about how it was like you combine a couple of them together, and I think it kind of evens it out. For example, like if you look at my lowest 3, impulse control, empathy, and assertiveness. Impulse control, I think most people agree with. I think the empathy and assertiveness are much lower than what really comes across. And I think that's maybe because how I was feeling at the time I was answering the question, or how I read into the question and wasn't really clear about it. And again, also because of the other things. Sorry about my screaming child who probably was there when I was answering the question.
Okay.
So all of those, I think it's a little lower than the whole thing than what I kind of see. But I definitely know there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. And Jason, I think that's a great point to, just sit down with a couple people who you think will give you, candid feedback. In some ways, kind of the quick and dirty version of a 360, just to say, hey, this is what, I got, this is what showed up, and, where do you see it happening? So, okay, good. How about the other breakout group? And by the way, when's your birthday, Jason?
Mid-December, December 7th.
Oh, okay. All right. How about the second group?
So it was me, Sharni, Ken, and Eric in our group. And my birthday's the end of December, so I guess I'm the closest.
Okay.
As a general statement, I think we agreed that there was a couple outliers, but for the most part, spouses, friends, colleagues would probably agree with our results. And overall, I think especially, like Ashley was saying, the top and bottom 3, we definitely agree where we either scored higher or lower, and there were some questions, but a general statement, I think we would agree with them. One thing we talked about is, and Jason and I actually talked about this before we went into the breakout rooms, is how cool it would be to see this kind of bifunctional group or business unit and blend all that together, because I know, like Jason made the comment about like the FMF group, we definitely have some strengths, and I'm sure everybody's functional group would be similar, I think, in some of these aspects. It's just an expectation of your function that you score higher on some of these than others. So I think that would be a cool exercise. I know we can't do it here because of the sensitivity and things, but that would be cool as far as how is it showing up at bit, I think, but it would be really cool to slice the data a different way.
Yeah, you absolutely can do that. I mean, I thought about running a group report for y'all, but because you can do that, but I didn't know if that would make sense in terms of where you all are reporting that type of thing. And then the other thing
Yeah.
too is if you decide you want to do a 360 or get that 360 data, it basically just takes what you've done already and then marries it up with with external raters. Anybody want to go out on a limb with one that you think you're going to want to prod on a little bit more, or kind of surprised you a little bit? Ashley mentioned empathy and assertiveness.
Yeah, mine was interpersonal relationships. I was surprised at how low that was on mine.
Okay, all right, good. Okay. Well, one follow-up comment to what Ashley said about a couple of them working together. That's for sure. You want to look at those that are colored the same way. So for example, like flexibility and stress tolerance, those are, fall under the same domain. Obviously one kind of feeds into the other. And so you want to kind of take a look at those balanced, across the subscale and the actual domain. But again, I want to just reiterate, if you want a deeper dive in your results, I can go item by item with you and kind of help unpack why a particular score showed up a certain way. I'm happy to do that. Just shoot me an email or what have you. You all have my email. If you want to dig down a little bit more. Otherwise, what you do to it now or what you do with it now is, kind of yours to consider. I hope that you do more with it than stick it in a file and stick it in a drawer, because I think it's pretty important stuff. It's important for you as leaders, and it's important for your organization as well. So thank you for your participation in this. And again, if there's anything I can do to help you take another look at it, I'd be happy to do so. Okay, all right. Enjoy the rest of your blustery cold Tuesday today.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.